Chad's government clamped down on the country's opposition, suspended 7 political parties and searched party offices a day after unprecedented protests around the country left more than 60 people dead. Demonstrators in the capital N'Djamena and several other cities took to the streets to protest against interim leader Mahamat Idris Deby extending his time in power by 2 more years. We begin this episode from West Africa. The aftermath. Devastated faces of families in agony, standing outside this makeshift mortuary to identify bodies of their loved ones. And just meters away, the injured sit, staring in oblivion. On October 20th, Chad's capital N'Djamena was engulfed in violent protests. When police fired tear gas at protesters, forcing them to flee. What followed was a series of violent clashes across many areas in and around the capital. Reports indicate police may have used live ammunition on the protesters. Burned tires littered the streets of Chagua district, a clear sign of what transpired.
Quand je me suis levée, j'ai ouvert la porte et j'ai vu les gens là sont rassemblés.
When I got up, I opened the door and saw people gathered and got scared. I went home with my children. I'm an orphan woman. They began to ransack the place. They even opened the gate and they went back there. They even threw rocks and threw them in my dealership. And they even burned that locker and threw it in the concession. Imagine, it's not war. It's just a demonstration.
C'est juste une manifestation.
The country's prime minister announced a curfew and suspended activities of major opposition groups, with the government blames for orchestrating protests that left at least 60 dead and over 300 injured.
I announced that the government of the Republic of Chad will ensure that order reigns throughout the territory and that it will not tolerate any excesses wherever they come from.
The United Nations was first to condemn the legal use of force and demanded an investigation.
We call on the authorities to ensure that the security, safety and human rights of all Chadians, including the right of freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, are respected. We also call on all parties to refrain from violence or excessive use of force and to remain committed to the spirit of dialogue in the interest of peace and stability in the country.
Chadians are furious because of this man, Mahamat Idris Deby, who became head of a transitional government when his father, former President Idris Deby Itno, died in April 2021 after over 30 years in power. Mahamat initially agreed to an 18-month transition. However, the government recently announced he would stay in power for another 2 years, prompting the protests. Chad is facing another disaster, floods. Half of the city was underwater. Residents of N'Djamena were forced to build dikes and use their dugout canoes to leave the flooded areas. The situation forced the president to declare an emergency.
This disaster resulting from climate change is one of the most severe the region has seen in years, acting as a multiplier of misery for communities already struggling to keep their heads above water. Chad, our country, has not been spared in this situation, which affects most of the country.
Unrests have been ongoing in Chad, which saw little public dissent during the previous regime of Deby's father. Officials claim the late Deby was killed by rebels while visiting his troops on the battlefield. Several demonstrations have taken place since his son became interim leader. Bureau Report, World of Africa. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.